guys, in this tutorial we will go over the basics of Python dictionaries. Before we start, please, if you find value out of this tutorial, like and subscribe. Also, the links to the notes and the code that you will see in this tutorial can be found in the description box. That being said, let's get to it. Introduction to dictionaries. So dictionaries are one of those concepts that if you are part of the data science, machine learning, and AI community, you need to be aware of dictionaries. Okay, so in plain English, dictionaries is just a data structure that allows you to store information in it. Okay, so let's start with the introduction. So Python dictionaries are a built-in data type that is used to store collections or value of key value pairs. Okay, they used to be an order that was prior Python 3.7, but now they are ordered. Okay, they are mutable, they are highly optimized for retrieving data. Okay, so again, a dictionary is a data structure, and in plain English, a data structure is an object that allows you to store data in it. Okay, it's mutable, meaning that you can change it, you can make updates to a dictionary, and it's highly optimized for retrieving data. In the context of data science, dictionaries are indispensable for managing structured data, configuration of settings, and mapping operations. And those by far are the three biggest applications of dictionaries in the data science, machine learning, and AI fields. Okay, so let's go over the basic syntax associated to dictionaries. So anytime that you want to create a dictionary in Python, so then you need to use the curly brace notation. Okay, basically between the curly braces, you start by listing the key values, okay, and the value that you want to store. So for example, in this particular dictionary called student, I have three keys, and the keys are name, age, and courses. Okay, and what are the values associated to each of those keys is Oscar, 33, and math and stats. Okay, so again, a dictionary is a key value data structure. So we're going to have keys, which in some sense they are the names of the objects that we want to store in the dictionary, and then we're going to have the values that we actually want to store. Okay, in this case, again, we have name, age, and courses, and then the value that we are storing under name is Oscar, the value that we are storing under age is 33, and the value that I'm storing under courses is a list with two values in it, math and stats. So if you want to print what is the value in the student dictionary stored under the key called name, so you will see that the output is Oscar. Okay, so that's basically the basic syntax associated to dictionaries. You need to, again, anytime that you want to create a dictionary, you need to use the curly brace notation. Now let's go over what are the applications of dictionaries in data science. Again, based on my experience, this is how I see how dictionaries are used, in particular in data science. Okay, so number one is they've been used, or I see dictionaries used in configuration management. So it's used to store model parameters, data path, and options in training pipelines. So then, for example, here we have a dictionary called params, and then here we have three keys and we have three values. Okay, the keys are learning rate, batch size, and epochs. So if you're familiar with neural networks, those three names will sound familiar. Okay, and then the values associated to those keys are 0.1, 32, and 50. Okay, so if you're familiar with scikit-learn, okay, typically you will want to pass the hyperparameter combination for the model that you're building as a dictionary. That's one of the options. Okay, so, and yeah, If you're familiar with scikit-learn, this should look very familiar. Okay, so that's one application, is for model configuration. Another common application of dictionaries is for data mapping purposes. Okay, here is a very simple example. So let's consider that we have a data frame called df. One of the columns in that data frame is gender full. Okay, right, in this case, or gender, let's call it gender mapping. Okay, so then what we have under gender, so I just want you to visualize this. So one of the columns in the data frame called df, so we have gender, and we have m and f. Okay, so what we want to do for modeling purposes is we can do math on labels. So basically we're gonna do some mapping. So in this case, we're gonna be mapping m to 0 and f to 1. That's basically what we're going to do. So then that way we can build models with that specific column. Okay, so one common application of dictionaries is just first to define the mapping that you want to consider. In this case, m is gonna get mapped to 0 and f is gonna get mapped to 1, and then you can apply that to the column of interest, which in this case is gender, that map, and then between the parentheses you enter the dictionary that has the mapping that you want to consider. Okay, and that will perform the mapping from labels into a 0-1 notation. That's another common application of dictionaries, especially from the data analysis standpoint. Another application, again, you can use dictionaries to store aggregation results. So you can store immediate results from groupings or computations. So you can create a dictionary called results, and in this case we have 4 keys, and the information that we have is the average sales, standard deviation of sales, the minimum value, and the maximum value. Okay, so this is a very common practice, in particular when you are, for example, you create a function and your function is performing some sort of calculation. You want to return a few values out of that function. So a common approach in that case is just to create a dictionary with all of the calculations that you want to return out of that function, and yes, store those values in a dictionary and return that dictionary out of the function. That is a common that is a common application of dictionaries. Okay, and you can also use dictionaries to, again, to store future importance and model metrics. Again, this is very similar to what we see here, right? Aggregation results. So then in this case we have a dictionary, and then here we have 2 keys, model 1, model 2, and then we are storing the information or the performance information associated to each of those models. Notice that here we have a dictionary and this is a dictionary. So the information that is stored under the model 1 key happens to be a dictionary that has 2 keys and 2 keys. Yes, and the 2 keys are accuracy and F1. Okay, so you can have dictionaries inside dictionaries. Okay, so you can nest them basically. Okay, so then again, based on my experience, these are the common applications of dictionaries in data science, data analysis, and machine learning that I see. Now let's briefly talk about the pros of using dictionaries. So number 1 is a fast lookups. So access time is near constant due to the hash-based indexing. So it's a very efficient data structure that you might consider, because when you want to access information from your dictionary, it is fast. Okay, it is readable, again, because when you look at a dictionary, right, like this one right here, you can easily read what's going on, what is the information that is stored there. So it is readable. Okay, it's flexible, because you can store complex data like lists, dictionaries, or objects as values. And it has some built-in methods, including that get, items, and update. Okay. What are the limitations? Now let's briefly talk about the limitation of dictionaries. Number one is key constraints. So then the keys must be hashable, meaning that they are immutable. You cannot, once the keys are defined, you cannot change it. You cannot change the key, but you can change the value stored under the key. Okay, so don't get confused between those two. Another limitation is memory overhead. So you will need more memory to create a list and to store. You will need more memory for create and store a dictionary when you compare that to lists. Okay. Another limitation is no vectorized operations. So then, you know, when we have numpy arrays, we have vectorized operations, meaning that there is a high chance that we can get away by performing some sort of like arithmetic operations without having the need of creating a for loop, right? And that is the case most of the time with numpy arrays. But when it comes to dictionaries, most of the time you will have to create a for loop if you want to perform some sort of like an iterative operation with that dictionary. Okay. Next section, a couple of suggestions when it comes to best practices with dictionaries. So use dictionaries for mapping and quick retrieval, not for numerical computation. Okay, for numerical computation, you either need to consider a numpy array, or so numpy array will be my first option, but you can also consider a list. Okay, but yes, just use it for mapping and quick retrieval. So another suggestion is use comprehensions for concise initialization. So then you can, for example, here we have a list that is performing some sort of calculation using a for loop. So then use comprehension. So then instead of like one of or a few of the lists that we define here, like let's see, yeah, like this one, right? So we define it with 3 lines. And if you can get away by just defining the list in 1 line, that's more concise. Okay, and that's, you know, one of the practices, the best practice tips that is suggested here, right? Like in this case, so we are defining the dictionary in 1 line. And use nested dictionaries for hierarchical information. However, things can get complex very quickly. Okay. And here we have an example of nested dictionary. So then here we have a dictionary called metrics, right? It has 2 keys, and then each key and the values stored on the each key happens to be a dictionary. All right. The last section is conclusion. So dictionaries are one of the Python most powerful and versatile data structures. So for data scientists, they provide a clean and efficient way to manage metadata, configuration, and mapping in models and pipelines. So being aware of dictionaries and knowing how to use it is a very crucial concept when it comes to data science, machine learning, and AI. Okay, and they are pretty easy to, again, they're pretty easy to use and pretty easy to create and do operations with it in some sense. Okay, so that's all I have with the notes. Now we're going to go over 3 basic examples that highlight how you can create a dictionary and do some basics operations with dictionaries in Python. Okay. All right, guys, now let's go over these 3 basic exercises that will highlight some of the basic components associated to dictionaries in Python. Okay, so first, on the first exercise, we will practice how you can create a dictionary in Python and how to perform some basic operations such as updating values in a dictionary. Okay. So first, in this exercise, we're going to create a dictionary called user profile. So we start with user profile, and the information that we want to store here is given here. So I'm just gonna copy this and paste it here, and then we're going to update a couple of things. So then number one, we just need to get rid of these dashes because that's gonna cause errors. And then here we're going to update the quotes. We're going to replace the quotes okay. So here we also do that. All right, now we are almost there. So then the first value stored under the key called user ID, that's a label. So then anytime that we are entering labels, they have to be in quotes. Now comma 34 is an integer, so I don't need to do anything there. Canada is a label, so that's fine. Let's log into, okay, so that's the dictionary, and then we can easily print that here using profile. So let's run this, and here is the dictionary. Okay, so that's the first part. Then the next part says write code to retrieve the value associated to the country key. So we see that this dictionary has 5 keys, and one of them is country. So anytime that you want to access a specific key from a given dictionary, basically what you need to do is the following. So you just need to type the name of the dictionary, so user profile, and then square brackets, and then in quotes you need to enter the key that you want to access. So in this case we want to access country, and then this will print Canada because Canada is the value that is stored under the key called country. Okay, the next part is asking us to update the value under age. So first, let's again one more time, let's print the original dictionary user profile, and we see that under age, under the key age, the value that is stored there is 34. So we want to update that to be 35. So in order to do that, we need to do the following. So we start by typing the name of the dictionary, so user profile, and then the key that I'm interested in, and then after that I just type equal 35, and that's a new value that I want to use. Okay, and then just to see how things went, so let's print the dictionary again one more time. And now we see that the value is stored under the key age now is 35. Okay, it's not 34 anymore, it's 35. And that's basically the steps, or this is basically what you need to do if you want to update the value stored under a specific key. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now let's go over exercise 2. Then here, yeah, we're giving a dictionary, so we need to create a dictionary called sample data, and then we're going to create a data frame using that dictionary, and then we're going to perform a very simple calculation here. Okay, that's another common thing, especially in data analysis. So then sometimes your data is stored as a dictionary, and going from a dictionary into a data frame is really simple. Okay, so let's do that. Let me just copy this dictionary. I don't need to type all of that. So again, I type sample data here just to see the dictionary. Here's the dictionary. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a data frame out of that dictionary, and we're going to call that data frame df. So first we need to import pandas for that. And then we create the dictionary. Let's call it df, and then pd data frame sample data. And that's all. That's all we need. Okay, let's run this. And now here we have our data frame called df with 3 rows and 3 columns. Pretty simple stuff, okay? If I want to, the next part is asking us to report the average pH, so meaning that compute the average of the values stored under this column called pH. It's very simple. Now that we have the data stored in a data frame, and if I want to access a column from a specific data frame, I start by typing the name of the data frame, square bracket, and then the column that you want to access, which in this case is pH, and then that mean, and that will compute the average. So then in this case, the average of the values stored under the pH column is 7. Okay. But again, the purpose of this particular exercise is just to highlight that it's very easy to go from a dictionary, right? If you have data stored as a dictionary, you can easily go from a dictionary into a data frame, into a pandas data frame, just by using the data frame command. Okay. All right, the next exercise in this case is we need to create a dictionary, and then this dictionary has some pipeline configuration. Again, that's another common application of dictionaries. And then the next part, we will do some conditional statements. Okay, so then we can use if and else if statements with dictionaries. Okay, and that's basically the purpose of this exercise. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to create a dictionary called pipeline. So pipeline config, and then we're going to store these values. So let's just copy them here. Copy and pasted them here. Now, what we're missing here are commas. So, and again, if you're familiar with networks, this seems to be configuration associated to some sort of like a network framework, because we have a batch size, we have a learning rate value. Here we're specifying where we want to, or where we want the location where we want to send the output of the process. And then this is something related to GPU. So then if you assuming that this is a network, and it's very common that if you have access to GPU computing, you want to use that in order to speed up with the computation. Okay, so this is the dictionary. So pipeline config. So let's run this, and then again, here we have my 4 keys. Here I have my 4 values for each of those keys. And then the next part is asking us to write a conditional statement that prints using GPU for accelerated training if use GPU setting is equal to true and the batch size is greater than 500. So this is just an if statement. Okay, so we can use if statements with dictionaries. Okay, and that is the purpose of this exercise, just to highlight that. Okay, so if, now in this case there are 2 conditions that we want to check, right? If use under GPU is true, so first we need to access use under GPU, right? Use underscore GPU, excuse me. So we will do pipeline config, and then I use GPU. So that will access that. Okay, so if that is equal to true, right? If that is true, and then the batch size is greater than 500, so I will do pipeline config, and then I want to access batch size. If that is greater than 500, so those are my 2 conditions, right? So here is my first condition, is checking is use GPU is equal to true, and my second condition is checking for the batch size. If that is greater than 500, so then column, and then what do I want to execute? I want to execute the following. I want to print using GPU for accelerated training. So using GPU for accelerated training. Okay. All right, so let's run this. And then in fact, we see that, right? We see this output. Why? Because if we look at the dictionary, use GPU, it is true. And the batch size, it is 512. And 512, it is greater than 500. So, and when you have a logical expression, right? In this case, we're combining two logical statements with and. So then all of this is true, and all of this is also true. So then basically we have true and true. So then the whole statement, it is true. So then that is why we see this message, because that statement will get executed. Okay, so again, the purpose of this particular exercise is just to highlight that we can also use if statements with dictionaries. Okay, so these are just three basic slash toy examples that again highlights how you can create a dictionary, how you can update a dictionary, and how you can in some sense use if statements, create data frames out of dictionaries. Okay. All right, so that's all I have in this tutorial. Okay, again, dictionaries are a very important concept, especially in the data science field. And once again, if you find value out of this video, please like and subscribe. That's all I have for this one. See you on the next one.